So please, colleagues, just take your seat. I understand that it's always hard to quit sandwiches and lunch for the continuation of our work. But no, thank you very much for all of you for being with us for this finally the two lunch break sessions, which will concentrate on the cross-cutting issues of the German presidency. We have just 45 minutes around for each of these two issues, which is gender, which will follow up to this to this event, and for the environmental considerations. So we start with this discussion on environmental considerations, and I'm glad to be here at the panel, joined by three panelists, which I will introduce when it comes to when they will take the floor. Perhaps just some small introductory remarks from my side. As you know, the environment and climate is a priority topic, a cross-cutting topic of the German presidency, and I think we all can see that this is gaining importance in the mine action sector, and it's certainly a topic which is relevant to all stakeholders, and all stakeholders. This is all in the sense that national authorities, clearance operators, and other implementing partners, as well as donors, are concerned. What we try to do with this panel is just to raise awareness, to increase awareness and understanding about just some of the many ways in which the environment and climate change link to the implementation of our treaty obligations. So the Ottawa Convention dates from 1997, and there are just two references on environment in the convention itself. And you know all that in the years since 1997, I think our understanding on the environment and climate change has improved significantly, and our understanding of the impacts of climate change and the urgency to take decisive action, both to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions and adapt to the changing environment, has increased considerably. So the 5-year Oslo Action Plan for the convention, which we adopted at the Fourth Review Conference in 2019, it does also not mention the environment and the climate change. So as we know, we are all in the run-up to the Fifth Review Conference next year, and I think that's really the moment where we should start stock taking when it comes to environment and climate, and the relationship with our convention. Also, in order to draw first lessons learned, and to prepare and to consider approaches how to include this very important topics into the new action plan, which has to be adopted at the review conference in 2024. And in this regard, I think we can also take advantage from what has been discussed and decided in the framework of the Cluster Convention, where we had the so-called Lausanne Action Plan from 2021, which already took into consideration quite a lot of these issues when it comes to formulating this action plan for the Cluster Convention. So Due to time constraints, the present test will mainly focus on considerations on relating to Article 5 today, and then to survey and clearance programs. But it is clear, and I think we all understand, that there are of course ways in which other ways in which the environment intersects with our with the provisions of our treaty. And when it comes to discussion, please feel free to raise these points in your interventions. And with this, then, I would like to turn to our first panelist, which is Lucy Pinches. Lucy Pinches is the project manager of Mine Action Review, which is an independent project that provides global monitoring and analysis of survey and clearance efforts. And she's presenting today on behalf of the environmental issues in Mine Action Working Group. So, Lucy Pinches, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ambassador Goebel, for making the environment one of the priorities of Germany's presidency. Many conflict-affected countries are located in areas considered among the most vulnerable to the effects of climate change, and many conflicts have occurred in some of the world's richest places for biodiversity. So it's really crucial that we link environment and climate change to mine action and to implementation under this convention. Next slide, please. So as you mentioned, I'm presenting on behalf of the Environmental Issues in Mine Action Working Group, which was established in 2020 and to which Mine Action Review is a member. The working group includes clearance operators as well as other members. The full members are on the screen, including some private organizations, academic institutions, UN agencies, ICRC and PMWRA. We meet every 2 months online. The working group's fully inclusive and is open to anyone interested in this topic within the centre, and we welcome new members. We're delighted to launch the new website this week, environmentinmineaction.org, and we have a contact us page and also a page of resources that could be useful for the sector, and we encourage you to make use of that. Next slide, please. So up front, I really just want to stress, as the ambassador said, this topic is important to absolutely everyone in the mine action sector. That's national authorities, clearance operators, and other implementing partners and donors. Next slide. So I'm going to start, well, just to say first, actually, there are, of course, direct environmental impacts of contamination itself, but as time is short, I'm going to focus on environmental impacts of clearance. These can come from vegetation removal, ground preparation, mechanical systems, work sites and waste, and explosive ordnance disposal, just to give a few examples. As environmental assessments are generally not conducted as part of the pre-clearance process, this can lead to removal of rare species or those that are vital to habitats and of specific importance to local population, and which sometimes need years to be restored. Soil degradation is equally serious, as topsoil can take up to 1,000 years to regenerate. Next slide, please. And it's possible to mitigate some of the negative impacts through things like implementing the IMAS 713, for example, not cutting down vegetation or larger vegetation where possible, looking at where you're using mechanical assets, if they're needed, where they're needed, what time of year. And central to mitigation efforts is really ensuring environmental assessments become a key part of our work to identify the potential negative impacts and reduce or eliminate them where possible. So risks to the environment should be addressed at every stage of operations. That's in pre-clearance planning, during survey and clearance, and post-operations. MPA, for example, is rolling out a green environmental assessment field tool in Vietnam, and that has indicators in place to identify potential risks from land release work. And this is going to be rolled out in all MPA country programs. ICRC has been supporting and promoting work on innovative solutions, so use of drones, remote sensing, artificial intelligence, And use of advanced technologies as part of the demining toolbox really helps support targeted clearance and reduce environmental impact of demining. And so too do animal detection systems, as mine detection dogs or rats are far less intrusive on the environment. And then, of course, efficient land release, using evidence-based survey to only clear areas where there's confirmed contamination is also a way of protecting the environment. There's an organisation that's a member of the working group called Munirem Environmental, and they're working with NGOs and commercial demilitarisation contractors to demonstrate and train their staff on application of chemical destruction of explosives into non-hazardous waste as an alternative to disposal of explosives by open burning and open detonation, which we know has an environmental impact. So they're at kind of the start of that process. So next slide, please. It's important for organisations and national authorities to consider other ways in which they can reduce their carbon footprint. And these should include things like green energy, procurement, waste management, recycling, and reducing of plastics. Next slide. So here we have the example of Halo Trust that's in the process of developing its carbon reduction plan, which will set out emissions it can avoid, reduce, or mitigate. So Halo in Zimbabwe, for example, saw introduction of its first solar power unit in 2016. It's built a solar shed based in Harare, and then worked on solar panels, solar trailers, like the one pictured, which is a mobile design for use in demining camps. So in addition to reducing greenhouse gas emissions, use of solar power has reduced noise pollution caused by traditional generators. It's improved the living conditions for staff in the field and has removed concerns about fuel security or inconsistent mains electricity, keeping operations running smoothly. Another good example is MPA in Lebanon that found after 1 year of installing solar energy in their field office in Tyre, they had paid off the initial investment and were already saving money. Next slide. Another good example is in Laos, PDR, where MPA has worked with a local youth-led organisation, Zero Waste Laos, to promote environmental awareness and reduce MPA's environmental footprint. So MPA has succeeded in reducing office waste to landfill by over 60%, and that's despite the lack of formal recycling or municipal garbage collection services in Laos PDR. MPA in Vietnam also has a small project trying to replace the many thousands of plastic sandbags used for demolitions every year with sustainable ones made of local grass. Next slide, please. We really encourage all humanitarian organisations, large or small, to sign up to the Climate and Environment Charter developed by ICRC and launched in 2021. There's also an an associated carbon calculator, which allows organisations to assess the direct and indirect greenhouse gas emissions associated with their activities. Next slide, please. So moving on to climate change and building climate resiliency. The IMAS 713 on environmental management in mine action was first published in 2017. It's currently being updated, hopefully by the end of this year. Climate change was only mentioned once in the current IMAS, but the new version will include several climate change considerations, and there'll also hopefully be a technical note to support implementation. Sadly, we're already seeing the impact of climate change, such as flooding, droughts, etc., in many countries. Next slide, please. So this photo is from Ukraine and the destruction of the Kakhovka Dam in the Kherson region. We've sadly seen the devastating impact that's caused, including potential large-scale shift in mines, hindering relief efforts and displacement of thousands of people. This was a man-made disaster and was unpredictable, but we do have the opportunity to predict risk and impact of climate change and what that means for contaminated areas. So, for example, if the Mekong Delta floods, the potential for the contamination to spread and hinder flood relief efforts, but also where will those people be relocated to? Do we need to start prioritizing clearance of higher altitude areas now? And I think Sasha's going to mention this under Bosnia and Herzegovina too. So it's important to take this into account and think of ways that climate change considerations could affect prioritization and planning of clearance tasks. Next slide, please. There's also the potential for clearance operators to collect data. MPA in Vietnam is collecting important data on climate and environment as a part of its access to households and communities through non-technical survey. And then this data can be passed to national authorities and organizations to help inform climate resiliency and adaptation measures. I know the Geneva Centre, another working group member, is conducting a study on climate change and mine action funded by PMWRA. So next slide, please. Moving on to post-land use clearance briefly. So in the arid landscape in which HALO works in Somaliland and Ethiopia, climate change presents a significant risk to life and livelihoods through food and water insecurity. HALO works with a small local NGO called Candlelight to train local communities on climate risk techniques in areas where HALO's previously cleared. So as this photo shows, this includes digging soil bunds to catch rainwater to allow areas to naturally regenerate and reseeding cleared land with native grasses to reduce land degradation. Next slide, please. Popo has established a syntropic farm as a pilot project in Zimbabwe, and syntropic farming is a sustainable agricultural technique that creates a diverse and resilient ecosystem, mimicking the natural forest structure and cycles. It's a low input and high yield method that enhances soil health, biodiversity and waste management. Next slide, please. So wrapping up, how can state parties support implementation of environmental and climate change considerations? As the ambassador said, a lot's changed since the treaty was adopted in 1997. And these 5-year action plans are a really excellent way to reflect important issues that we've come to understand much better as a community in those intervening years. The Oslo Action Plan, adopted in 2019, is very comprehensive, but it doesn't include the environment. The next action plan, as we heard, that will be elaborated next year and adopted, must reflect the environment and climate change considerations in implementation of the Mine Ban Treaty. And the EMA working group stands ready to support this. Thank you. And we've just got a reminder of the web address on screen.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Lucy, for this presentation. And without further ado, I will directly pass on to Sasha Obradovic, with the director of Bosnia and Herzegovina Mine Action Center, and the long experience, let's say, also on the ground as practitioner when it comes to all these issues which were just raised by Lucy. So please, Sasha, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, attending the plenary is also a clean indicator the state parties are taking environmental safety seriously, and this important issue needs to be considered to take place in the next action plan. Preparing myself to the plenary, I committed to landmines and other explosive remembrance of the war, casual land on soil degradation, so of biodiversity and several limits of agriculture productive. Yet the quickest and most effective methods for elimination of landmines and other explosive remnants of the war can sometimes result in quality deplored situation. Lands one are able can become inferior, unable to provide much needed agricultural resources. Most national authorities in countries dealing with the landmines and ARV have not yet introduction on the national standards on environmental management, and many of these countries also do not always have strong environmental legislative of governments in the place. National standards do not have specific provisions of the element protection. However, the existing procedures of measures of humanitarian demining, method of removing vegetation and removing metal and waste using machines, contribute to management and protect the environments. In career cases, we modified the application of procedures in the order to protect the environment without the quality of the clearance area on the safety of personnel involved the mining operation on the using the area, not demystifical trust in the entry protect of the humanitarian demining. All metal found in the work path is deposited in special place for collecting metal waste. We communicate with the local population over the land in case that the need for mechanical preparation of the land. For the most part, in the order to preserve the vegetation, we avoid machinal soil preparing to Monty pastures. Also, in the order to preserve the natural vegetation on the soil, we avoid using third machine to distribute the soil deeper at 20 centimeters. In order to preserve settling and natural for the reservation via community with the local community, competent forest farms regarding the removal of vegetation. Vegetation removal from work past are formed boxes in the arranged neatly in the order free of space for until restore of vegetation. In the event the assessment is made of the assessed of the risk for the relocating of mines URV, the found assessed to destroy decision polygons from destruction. Bosnia and Herzegovina Mine Action Center, with the framework of this mandate, pays special attention to clearing areas with the most important natural resource that cannot be used due to existence of the mine hazard. As of that explanation is MSA UNA, it's the municipality of the Bihać. This area representative on unique natural entity in this part of the Europe, valued for the preserve of the over biological diversity. After the May floods in the Bosnia and Herzegovina in 2014, is cooperation with the Belgian Royal Military Academy. We are using drones. Were used to map the area, remove, survey suspected hazards sites, and find unexploded ordnance from the war deployed for flooded and landslides. On the base of the information recovered mines on the ARV, we are removed from flooded and landslides effects are the were not provide suspected of having mines. Based on the experience gained in the community of the activities, we have activity full cooperation with local community regarding the priority solution of the problem in suspected hazard area with high risk of the flooded and landslides. Bosnia and Herzegovina is affected every year by forest fires, which are particular of the far south and southwest. In mine suspected location, firefighters are not available to provide safe access for extreme lengths to significant environment to economic damage. For social, economic, and ecological reasons, we attach great importance to mine clearance of the land in forest area. For this reason, in the winter period, the mining capacity are directly to implement of the mine action operation in south area of Bosnia and Herzegovina. International consultation regarding international standards are currently underway with the aim harmonizing with the current IMAs and employing good practice. Agenda 2030 is plan of the action for people, the planet, and prosperity. Bosnia and Herzegovina has recognized the important potential for implementation of Agenda 2030 as an opportunity to signify important social, economics, and environmental aspects for life with the country and the regional cooperation. On term of mine action for prospective contributed of mine action or relevant in sustainable development goals are as following. In this year, Bosnia and Herzegovina is planning to work on the national mine action strategy revision, and environment will be incorporated with these never adopted documents. As a state party, Bosnia and Herzegovina is responsibility to maintain and advise and verbal safely on national and international level. Considering the Bosnia and Herzegovina Mine Action Center system is recognized international and such is capable of provide assistance of the countries in the area of the mining, knowledge, technology, experts, and education. I look forward to discuss important issue with other participants on this panel and the other part present as well. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Sasha, for this remarks. And now I turn immediately to last panelist, which is Anna Mikeska, which is the Deputy Permanent Representative to the Conference on Disarmament of Germany, which should just give some remarks on the donor perspective. So please, Anna, you have the floor.
Thank you, Excellencies, dear colleagues. Donors must play their part in supporting the mine action sector to mainstream environment and climate. And at the same time, we are aware of possible conflicts between environment protection, maximal safety of our demining staff, and efficiency and clearance, for example, through the use of heavy machinery. With increasing humanitarian needs around the world and funding being limited, these kinds of conflicts will increase. And we as a sector need to be ready to have the necessary discussions with our implementing partners and national authorities. Many mine action donors, like Germany, include environment and climate change considerations in their humanitarian strategies, but not necessarily in their mine action strategies, or only through referencing the importance of all international mine action standards. Germany is a signature to the Humanitarian Aid Donors Declaration on Climate and Environment, which was launched at the first European Humanitarian Forum in March 2022. The 4 commitments in the declaration are all relevant to mine action, and they can be summarized as invest to help or prevent disasters, improve cooperation and partnerships, increase efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and improve biodiversity, and foster conditions for adoption of environmentally friendly practices. One way to implement the necessary reduction of greenhouse gas emissions is by looking at how our organization in itself works. Do we use renewable energy in our headquarters or field offices? Are we aware that the supply chain causes over half of humanitarian action emissions? To help organizations assess and reduce their organizational and operational emissions, Germany collaborates with the Climate Action Accelerator to establish a generic open source available roadmap for CO2 reduction by 50% by 2030. Even without an existing roadmap, one way for donors to honor the charter commitments is through project funding regulations. This entails, for example, requesting implementing partners to comply fully with all relevant international and national mine action standards, to carry out environmental impact assessments, and to implement the do no harm concept with regard to the environment. Prioritizing projects that aim to mitigate potential negative impacts of mine action and agreeing to use project funding for the purchase of sustainable energy sources will contribute to changes in the sector as a whole. Germany is, for example, very happy that many of our partners increasingly rely on solar panels for the miners' camps and supports these approaches through respective project funding. Projects that include land rehabilitation plans, at best in cooperation with a local partner, have our full support. For example, one of our projects by Halo Trust in Somalia and Ethiopia foresees the rehabilitation of released land in cooperation with the NGO Candlelight. As donors, we can and should encourage such cooperation with environmental NGOs wherever possible. And it is more than pure environmental responsibility. It is about proper land use after land release. We can also consider supporting capacity building of national authorities to help incorporate climate and the environment into national programs. Another important point is the sharing of knowledge, best practices, strategies, and innovations to minimize environmental impact, as we also do here today in this panel. As we all share the same challenges when it comes to mine action, by pooling our resources and working together, we can find new and innovative ways to minimize environmental impact. Furthermore, as we've heard from Lucy on the IMAS 713 on environmental management and mine action, it is currently in the process of being reviewed and updated by the IMAS Review Board. Donors can also play a role in encouraging and supporting clearance operators and national mine action authorities to comply with the revised IMAS 713 once it will be adopted. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. And I've seen the clock running in front of me, and I think we all knew that it was a very challenging endeavor to have this this very interesting topic squeezed into 40-50 minutes plenary. So unfortunately, I can just open the floor for 2 questions or comments, and to give for the panelists also an opportunity perhaps to react to this. Are there any questions or comments by the plenary? So first come, first serve. I have some problems to read your nameplate. That's please the colleague in the back of the room. ICRC? Oh, it's ICRC. Oh, please, ICRC, your floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you for organizing this panel. Mine action must do no harm to the communities and areas where contamination exists, which includes mitigating any adverse environmental impact of mine clearance operations. We welcome the increasing attention to this subject and appreciated the recent publication of a policy brief titled Mitigating the Environmental Impacts of Explosive Ordnance and Land Release by the Mine Action Review. This issue was also addressed in the ICRC's guidelines on the protection of the natural environment in armed conflict, Rules 24 and 25, published in 2020. One of the rules specifically recalls the obligations of the APMVC. The guidelines raise concern regarding the environmental impacts of the use of mines in the first place, as well as the unintended environmental impacts of mine action. ICRC jointly organized the first environmental impact management in mine action workshop in the region together with the ASEAN Regional Mine Action Center, ARMAC, last year. In this respect, the mine action sector can draw on practical guidance from the International Mine Action Standard on environmental management in mine action, but also current good practices in the sector. The mine action sector is still at the development stages of integrating, mainstreaming, and regulating environmental protection and impact mitigation in policies and practices. The key to integrating this into the sector properly is a recognition that the expertise lies outside the sector and efforts and connections need to be made at various levels. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. President, the GICHD would like to emphasize the critical importance of integrating environmental considerations in the Convention's implementation and highlight the opportunities the sector has to contribute to climate change resilience. Today, more than ever, and regardless of the region of the world, we all face extreme weather events that have significant effects on all aspects of life. It is imperative that we broaden our perspective and recognize the intersectionality of environmental concerns and humanitarian efforts. As we move towards our collective aspiration of a mind-free world that is safe for future generations, we must not neglect the long-term implications of mine action operations on our planet and the existing opportunities to positively contribute to mitigating the effects of climate change and strengthening resilience. One of the key environmental considerations in mine action is the use of land and natural resources. Clearance activities often require the removal of vegetation and the alteration of ecosystems to ensure the safe removal and disposal of explosive ordnance. While these measures are necessary, we must work diligently to minimize their environmental impacts, including pollution aspects. The GICHD produced a practical guide to explosive ordnance pollution of the environment in 2021 to that effect. The GICHD also supports the current revision of IMA 713 on environmental management. Implementing the convention also entails considering climate change resilience. Humanitarian mine action interacts with other sectors such as agriculture, education, health, and tourism, all of which contribute to building communities' resilience to climate change. National mine action authorities also have a role to play, especially when it comes to prioritization and tasking in the face of climate events. All these aspects are currently explored by the GICHD in a study conducted on mine action, climate change, and resilience. Lastly, let us not forget mine action's responsibilities when it comes to mitigating climate change. The GICHD is committing to reducing its carbon footprint in line with the 2050 Today initiative, a climate action forum where institutions of international Geneva come together to tackle climate change. Mr. President, as we all work together for a world free of landmines and explosive remnants of war, we need to cooperate and collaborate with other sectors to ensure that environmental considerations are addressed in mine action. We must share best practices, knowledge, and resources to ensure that environmental considerations are fully integrated into humanitarian mine action frameworks. The GICHD is proud to be part of the IEMA working group to that effect. Be it at the national level through national mine action strategies, or at the international level through the convention, humanitarian mine action has a role to play to create a more sustainable and secure world for generations to come. Let us seize this opportunity to strengthen our commitment to environmental responsibility and build a future where humanitarian mine action and environmental stewardship go hand in hand. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this intervention. For your comprehension, I would just take one other intervention. The delegate for Sri Lanka has asked for the floor. There's the bad news that I will close down the list of speakers to give an opportunity to the panelists to respond. There's the good news that there will be a side event on environment tomorrow, where you can all participate and express your views again. But please, I ask for your comprehension because we're already taking time from our next lunch break session with Jean, which is equally important, at least to the German presidency. So please, Sri Lanka, you have the floor.
Gentlemen, Sri Lanka is mainly concerning environmental concern in the demining activities. Already we complete the resettlement area, and now we are doing mostly in the ironing the resettlement forest area, ironing the resettlement. We can discuss with the forest department and make a criteria, develop the criteria to how to conservation, make the conservation the forest area, and expect to include in the SLM, Sri Lankan Mine Action Standard, to safeguard the forest department. With the concern, we are doing the mine action clearance in future. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this intervention. And as I said, I think this was meant also as a sort of a kickoff event where we were starting discussions, and I'm very encouraged by the large interest in exploring further this very important issue of environment and green implementation of our convention. I think this is what we have to concentrate on in our run up to the Review conference. To make sure that our convention is also has a clear clear green lens when it comes to the implementation of their provisions. And with this, I would like to close this panel to move on to our other next lunch break event, but not before just giving the opportunity to Lucy, Sasha, and Anna, if they wish though to just very briefly to say a last word.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the fact that there is so much to say, we would really encourage the environment to be put on the agenda of the MSP meeting in November and future meetings to give the opportunity to really address this. So as the ambassador said, there's a side event tomorrow with Halo MPA of Popo giving more detail of what they're doing and an expert speaker on nature-based solutions. And then we have an NDM panel event where Karen Chandler of PMWRA is presenting the United States perspective on climate resiliency, and UNMAS is also presenting on that, and the EMA working group and the HMAC. Encourage people to collaborate, engage with the environment working group, share best practice. It's in everyone's interests and the planet's. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Sasha?
Thank you, Mr. President, from this event, and I think this is a very important topic from the mining and from countries who is the mine problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Sasha.
Thank you. Yes, the donors really must play their part in mainstreaming climate and environment, and I think it's a discussion to be continued. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a discussion to be continued, that's for sure, but not yet. So please, I ask for your comprehension, and we will just change the panel, and please keep seated. We continue directly with the next lunch break session we have foreseen for today. Thank you very much.